a question I haven't asked any of you, but I'm wondering what your response would be. Do you feel like leadership gets lonely?
I don't think so. Because as I talked about in my speech yesterday, I'm leading leaders. So I don't feel isolated about this. I have my entire team helping, guide the journey that we're on together. So I just have the privilege of representing a great organization, but it's my leadership team that I'm working with and my colleagues and peers that, help along that journey. So that's how I feel about it. I feel it's a team effort.
Phil?
Yeah, and so I'll go next. So yes and no. I think it's definitely a team effort. And I totally agree with Lynn. And the key is to have good teams around you that are better than you, and that really, really, really helps. And the whole diverse thing we talked about. It's also to have people that you can talk to, because it can be lonely. You can't share. So where it does go, there's certain things you just can't share. Okay, and particularly in the public world. But back to your question earlier. I mean, did she leave? Well, if you're in private equity, trust me, you're under equal amount of pressure. So yes and no. But you got to have a great team. I think that what Don talked about was right on with the transparency and communication and whatnot. But it's also, that's why I think it's really, really important to keep that balance. Whether it's family, friends, to keep things in perspective too, because we can really beat ourselves up and say, hey, is that's not healthy either, right? So I think it's a balance. But there's days for sure you're gonna. It's good to have a dog. So it's you get home and the dog's there, unconditional love. Every day. They don't care what you do.
Okay. Linda, did you have anything that you were trying to say?
I don't know that I have anything different, because I would say the same thing, because I'm leading leaders, but I'm also part of a leadership team. And so, there's times where you're going to make really hard decisions and have to face some pretty hard things. But if you've got a good team, and I loved what Michael said earlier about you can have a lot of talent on the team, but you don't have a good team if you don't have a diverse team.
I love that
I wrote that down. That was a really great comment. So you've got to have your tribe too. And the dog is good too. But I talked about anchors. You've got to have your anchors too, and so that's outside of work. So.
And then Linda, you talked about coachability. That was a pretty amazing slide that you showed that as we rise in our careers, a lot of times we become less coachable. So how has each of you stayed coachable?
That's a big assumption on your part.
I think I can answer for Michael. He's still working on that.
Yeah, it's a really good point, because I feel very strongly that coaching is the connection point between managing and leading. That's where managing turns into leading, and coaching is an extremely important piece of that. I worked for not quite a year, felt like a lot longer for Coach Phil down there, and I want to give him credit for this. Actually, I'm not much of a coach, but to the extent that I am, it's something I'm working on. But it came from my experience with Phil, and I would say that because it's related. Because I'm not much of a coach, I'm also kind of hard to coach. And anybody who knows my wife knows that this is kind of I'm her lifelong project. She's bound and determined to beat me into some semblance of a decent, normal person. And so it's all related, because I think that's really important. But the coaching thing is that's pretty interesting, and it's a hard thing too, because as you go up, there are less people. I would say that you've got to reach out and grab it, because people are more inclined to just take what you say and move on, and you don't get a lot of feedback. I work for a private equity company and the private equity guys are not shy about giving feedback, but it ain't coaching. Yeah, it's a butt kicking, which is different. So, a great question.
I think it goes with what I said just a few minutes ago, seeking the feedback. You know, the higher up that I've gotten, as Michael said, there's fewer people in the organization that are chartered with coaching you. So you have to go out and seek that. And a lot of times, you know, I get a lot of that now outside of the business that I'm in. It's safer for the people giving the coaching. It's easier for me to take it, I think. So I think you have to keep seeking it.
And the only thing I'd add, and you mentioned this as well, you have to be very open to the feedback and to make sure you're taking the time to be introspective and to really think about the particular situation that they're referring to, how you can improve, and making sure the people that you're seeking that coaching from know that it's really desired. It's very safe for them to give really, harsh feedback if necessary, if that's, what I want. My husband does that regularly as well, because he's one of my, big coaches. He's been along the journey with me my entire career. So he's not in the industry, but he gives me feedback all the time, as do, a lot of my direct reports who are with me on, a regular basis. So it's seeking it, absorbing it, and making sure people feel safe when they're giving it to you.
Yeah, I think just to add, and thanks, Mike, for the comments. That was nice. No, it was really. There's formal coaching, right, or feedback you get. In my case, maybe from the chairman or what have you, and I think it speaks to you got to be vulnerable and humble. If the day you stop listening, or the day that anybody stops getting coached and learning, the end is near, right? So you look at, I love all sports. I love, but you look at golfers, you look at, figure skating, you look at anything. The best in the world, when they're done playing, they're back out on it with their coach, right? So I don't care how good you are, you're not perfect, okay, and never will be. So I think that it's, but you got to be open to it, to Lynn's point. And then the feedback piece, a lot of the coaching comes from all of you. I mean, when you walk around the building or you travel around the world, just people will give you, if you're open and you show some vulnerability, they're going to give you the feedback. And I get an amazing amount of feedback, even after a global town hall. You got to take it. But if you're not open to it, people will see through that, and when they stop giving you feedback is when you're in trouble, right? If people aren't going to tell you, then you're going to be in trouble. So anyway, yeah, it's good. It doesn't always feel good, but
That's it.
it is good.
And you got to be willing to do something with the feedback. And that's where, it's one thing to get the coaching and solicit the feedback. But if they don't feel like that you're listening or doing anything with it, they're going to clam up.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here because I have the mic. Good afternoon. So, quick question for you. I had a really interesting conversation with the Table 1 yesterday that I was sitting with, where we were talking about this is the first time in history that we've had 5 generations activated in the workforce. And so, as leaders, I'm curious, how are you changing the way your leadership style, your communication styles flex to make sure we're activating all of our team members across those 5 generations and flowing down the critical information and priorities in a manner that they can consume it the best that they can?
That's a heck of a question. Yeah, and a really important one, because I think it gets lost, this notion of different generations, because generationally there are different means of communication. I mean, boomers don't want to get texts; they probably want a face-to-face conversation. The newer generations probably prefer text. So I think it starts with an understanding of that. And just speaking for myself, I'm not sure when this happened, but I became aware of this. Actually, I am sure of when it happened. Quick story. I was in the Northeast traveling with a sales rep up there. and one of our been with us for a long time, and I don't know how old this person was, but old, probably my age. So we went into first customer, and the people we were meeting with were younger people, and it wasn't happening. There was no connection there. I could feel it. You know, you guys have been in that situation, right? It gets uncomfortable. You're like, oh, come on, we got to wrap this up and move on before these guys just scratch us off the list. But he wasn't getting it. And no surprise, guy not getting it, low EQ, right? I'll own it. Next customer, different deal. We were meeting with two people actually that were more our generation, and it was a bit more comfortable, all the rest of it. And that was my aha moment that, wow, we've got to figure out a way, to your question, to teach, especially those folks who engage directly with our customers, to create some awareness so that it's not like you've got to have young people calling on young people and old people calling on old people. You have to have people who are not tone deaf and that understand the differences and that can make that connection. Otherwise, you got a big problem. And I would say that a lot of companies in this industry have a big problem. We're sending 50 and 60-year-old people in to work with 20 and 30-year-old people. And if you think back, you guys, when you were 20 or 30, did you really want to sit in a conference room and have a meeting with your grandfather? Probably not.
So I love that question, and I think that goes both ways. And I think COVID, we all get tired of talking about COVID, but it taught us so much about how to communicate differently. And, I agree with Don. I like the person-to-person, face-to-face, build a relationship. Drives me crazy when people just want to send an email or a text, like, pick up the phone and talk to me. But I think we've learned that we can really effectively communicate virtually. We have agents and teams that they're on a chat all day long, and they're getting all kinds of work done, but they are so connected. And so we're learning from each other on how to communicate. And I think, generations that don't like the face-to-face also need to learn how to do some of that so we have a balance and we can communicate more fully. And I think I feel grown in appreciation of the various ways to communicate and that you can get things done in all manners of communication.
Yeah, I see it less about the generations. I know I think part of that's a stereotype. I look at it, I think we have to be able to communicate in all domains. I mentioned face-to-face, the way I learned years ago. You can't do that all the time. Then it was the email and the text. Now you've got the video conference calls and, this AI, where AI is going. For me to be able to go in and send my avatar in order to communicate, I think all of us will be doing it before long. And I think we have to adapt. Even Phil with his daytimer. I can't wait to see the daytimer with the avatar.
It still works, Don.
No, but it is not as secure.
But I don't need, it's nice, I don't need the time zone map in the back they used to give you, because that's on my app now, on the phone. I think it's not as much generational, although it's a great question. I'm more face-to-face as well. I think it's more the style of the self-awareness of the audience. I think it's back. I think that's kind of where Mike was going. Are they analytics? Are they expressives? That hasn't changed. I've been here 42 years. You go in and if you're an expressive and you're presenting to an analytic and you don't read that quick out of the gates, he or she does not give a crap of what you're saying. And I've been there with presentation. People just keep on going. It's like, oh my God, I know exactly what Michael's talking about. So I think that hasn't changed. That's still very much the case. You need to be self-aware and understand your audience no matter where you are. And the reason, of course, some of it's generational. I'm not. It might surprise you. I'm not a big social media guy, but I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm not on the other stuff for a lot of reasons, frankly. But when we meet with the interns, and we do in Claudia's, we have face-to-face. We have such a good time. They love the face-to-face. And they love when they're in the cafeteria and they see us walk around and we stop and say, hey, how you guys doing? They're like, holy cow, wow. So I think it just depends. But I think it's more expressive. And, of course, now it's international. I think the bigger change is on the global side. You go and do a town hall in Japan, and don't try to tell a joke. I mean, it's really, wow, you talk about stage fright. Because it's not that they're not laughing, they're just not going to express it, right? In Taiwan, kind of the other way around. They did a town hall for 650 people, and the challenge there is the flashes, because they just love the cameras and all that kind of stuff. But it's hilarious. The energy was super high and super face-to-face. So I think you just got to adjust to the audience, and it's not as much generational as it is stylistic, I think.
Over here. Hi, guys. Dawn, I can't wait to see those deep fakes. It's going to be epic.
I'm gonna control the script. So yeah, I've got control of it. Even though I've signed 27 consents, knowing what I'm doing. Yeah.
So selfishly, I have two questions, one personal and one professional. Janine mentioned in yesterday's session something about the heart and the mind being connected through breath. I've got a mentor that subscribes to meditation and really setting aside time daily. So I'm curious if maybe he's a hippie or what your thoughts are on that. If you do that personally, that's my first question. If you meditate personally or have found value in it, and what specifically you do. My attention span is pretty short that way, so I'm looking for tips. And then the second is, now that it seems each of you is very successful in your careers, can you name something specifically that you know today that you wish coming into the industry and sort of growing in your career you would have known back then?
I'll start. I do not meditate. I wish I could settle my mind enough to do, because I've tried and I'm just, it doesn't work for me. But I do find that retail therapy is... I know you're laughing, but I'm not kidding. There's certain stores, if I've had a hard day, I'll go and say, you know what, I need to go stop into Bella James, and it's just going to make me feel good on my way home. So retail therapy is mine. And what I wish I knew when I was younger is to have enjoyed the moments of the journey as opposed to trying to race towards the future.
I can go next. So I do not meditate. I have not learned that practice either, but I do have things that I know that bring me calm. And so for me, and I said yesterday, I'm a lover of nature. I love to be outside. So I know that if I can go outside and I can maybe go for a walk in the woods or ski or whatever it might be, ride my horse, take the dog for a walk, whatever that be, that's going to just bring me calm. And so that's kind of how I ground myself, or look at, picture my grandchild. That those things ground me and bring me calm. So I kind of equate that to meditation, because it calms my mind and my body and soul and everything. So, and as far as a wish for something I would have known early or done earlier in my career, probably not waited so long to speak up. And add to the conversation, share your opinion, be brave enough to do that. And so, yeah, that's my advice. Speak up.
So, that interesting question, Minty. I actually am a meditator, and really believe in the whole notion of connecting to breath. But to Lynn's point, it's not easy when you got a lot of things running around in your head. But when you can do, and I would encourage anybody to try it. You got to get some coaching on this. But if you can pull it off, it's pretty amazing, and it's really refreshing. And and it's different than sleeping in a meeting, which I have been known, that's happened once or twice, and I blame it. I actually try and pass it off as meditation. Yeah. But the serious question about what you would have known is wish you would have known. I actually, as I think about it, I'm kind of ignorance is bliss. I'm really glad that I didn't know, because it might have kept me from doing some of the things that I did. Might have kept me from pursuing some opportunities as they were presented. I think I've frankly really benefited from some of the male 7 superpowers about lack of awareness and all that kind of stuff. I know it sounds kind of funny, but I think that's true, at least for me. How about the 2 knuckleheads at the end?
It is a good question. I don't I don't meditate either, and I've tried. And I do work out. I do every morning. I'm up every day around 10 to 5 or so, and I do the gym. I try. That's the only time of the day I get to myself really 100%. So I do that almost every day. So that does help. It doesn't count as meditation, I guess, but it is peace of mind. The other questions of 64. That's a huge question. I kind of more like maybe along the line of wins. And I still struggle with this. Is we talk so much about yesterday and worry about tomorrow instead of enjoying today. And we can't control what already happened. It's historical, and we don't really know what's around the corner tomorrow or the next week or month, but we worry about that too, right? And just sometimes you just got to take time to enjoy the moment, But that you're not told to do that yet. I'm going to work on that a little bit better.
I do not meditate. Yeah. But I would like to. But I'm like Phil. So the physical activity piece of it, and I've been religious about that since I was a teenager. And that's the way I clear my mind. And it doesn't matter if I've had no sleep or if I've had a lot of sleep. It definitely it re-energizes me. So I use it. I'll say along those same lines to connect. The one thing that I wish I had, part of what I talked about earlier was, looking at all the people that you interface with and, focusing on the strengths versus the weaknesses. I learned it. It took a while in order to go do that, but there's, a lot of strengths from every person. And trying to make sure that you understand how to leverage those. I wish I'd have learned that when I was 25 instead of when I was 35.
All right, I have the next question. Over the last 2 days, we've heard so much about your values, which has been amazing, how you apply them and how that affects how you're showing up as a leader. My question is, how do you both encourage and enable your teams and your leaders to show up with their values to maximize their impact to the organization?
I think for me, it kind of goes to what we talked about yesterday about leading by example. I am very forthcoming with my team about my leadership principles, my personal beliefs, that we need to always do the right thing. And there's no gray area when it comes to that. So I hopefully find that, by me being very forthcoming with my expectations and giving that clear direction, that it flows down throughout the organization and people follow that. And you don't always have, 100% where people align with the leadership, but it does become clear who is aligning and who's not over time. And that's, I think, just the best way to do it is lead by example.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think that so much of what was talked about today, I missed yesterday, or we weren't allowed to be here yesterday. But the tone at the top matters. I mean, it does. And people are watching you more than they're listening to you. Okay, and it's not how you act in the meetings; it's how you act when you're not together. And it's kind of the old saying: the culture, walks around on 2 feet, right? So I'm adamant on this. I get 0 time. I talked to some of the team here last night. Hey, we're not perfect by any stretch of imagination, and we work to do the best. We're going to make mistakes, but I set the tone. It's about the team, okay, and it's about respect for each other. And I put this communication out the whole organization. What you can expect from me, what I expect from you, and with my team, direct staff, do not throw one of your peers under the bus unless you're holding their hand. So don't do it. It's just not right.
I don't have much to add to that. It is about leading by example. And I think if you are leading with your values and you don't compromise those, other people they feel safe and they're willing in order to let those. And to your point, they're never going to align 100%, with your, with my values or with the company's values. But the most important ones, the key ones, have to.
I think the only thing I would add to that is I agree with everything that they've said is, and I think you've heard it probably from all of us, or many of the speakers too, is you don't ask of them anything that you wouldn't do yourself. And I guess that's, the same as leading by example, but I'll embarrass Dave a little because he's, sitting in the audience. Maybe I won't embarrass him, but give him a compliment as an example. And we had team members, and it gets cold in northern Minnesota. And it was, 70 below, I think, with the wind chill a few winters ago. And our fulfillment people need to be there every day to get our packages out the door. And they're there, till late at night and whatnot. And you go out and your vehicle's sat in minus 70 wind chill for the day, it's not going to start. A lot of them aren't going to start. So we had Dave riding around in a pickup helping jump cars. And, that speaks more than any keynote, any town hall, anything to the values of a company and how you care for people. So I think, leading by example and doing those things to care for people are what you really need to do to show people what your values are.
I feel like a Nimrod next to Dave. well done. Yeah, I 0 to add. You guys covered that really, really well. I couldn't agree more with everything that was said.
So I've got a question for Lynn, and it may have been covered yesterday when I wasn't here, and I may recall incorrectly, so I apologize if that's the case. So I think was it Dr. Shaw, the lady? Yeah. There was the male and the female kind of traits, characteristics. And I think the question that was asked was, if presented with an opportunity, what do you do? And my answer was the Richard Branson one. You just take it and figure it out, right? And I think it might be Kylie said the opposite one. So, Lynn, I was reading your bio at some point or an interview, and I think Phil, Dawn, Michael, you all touched on this today and have encouraged the ladies here to try to take a risk, to have the confidence to take a risk, right? Be a consistent theme. So the thing that stood out when I read your bio, I was like, whoa. And I wanted to ask you this, is moving to Germany into a field sales role, I think, with EBV. Mm-hmm. So having covered Germany before myself when I was in Europe and set up a little office there, that was I found that very challenging as a Scottish person coming from London. How did you find that? Because I think there's something in that for everyone in the room.
Yeah, I touched on it a little bit yesterday. I actually followed my husband to Germany, so that's what led us there. He had an opportunity in his career, and I had been working at Wiley Electronics, and Wiley had been bought by Weber. So in my 27-year-old confidence, I'm like, well, I'll just go work at EBV since it's a sister division, and that'll be great. My husband had a year contract. I'll go work there for a year. So I went there, got an interview. It was just like, yep, I worked at Wiley, now I'd like to come in and work here. And they didn't quite know what to do with me because I was only signing up for a year contract. By the way, they heard the story yesterday, but I stayed for 8, so it was fun. But it was super hard to kind of break in to the German culture, kind of even to make friends. They're a little more closed off in making friends that I wasn't used to, and probably really good that I was very naive about that side of it, because I was able to come into work and bring value because we were bringing together the MEMIC organization, the EBV organization, and the Wiley organization. So coming into work and being able to show value was interesting, and I did a lot of customer-facing, supplier-facing roles. And I think one of my things that really helped during that time is I have an insatiable curiosity. So I ask questions everywhere I go of the people I was working with about their lives, about their families, about, you know, where they're from and cultural norms, and that seemed to break down those barriers. And it took a little bit longer, but I did make friends as well, which helped. But yeah, it was just probably one of those things that it was good that I did not know how hard it was going to be. Moving to Germany, how much I did not know about the daily life, the norms, because it was a big challenge for months before you kind of learn. I mean, the simplest thing, going to a grocery store. Nothing looked the same. I couldn't even figure out how to get the cart to disconnect because it was, you know, this is 1997. So I'm standing there and I'm looking, and it took me a few times before I recognized they're taking a euro, or no, it was a Deutschmark at the time, and you have to connect it. But I was like, oh my God, that took me that long? Parking was hard. Everything was hard. One funny story, when I was driving, I'd be driving along and come to a stoplight and take a right. I'd hear all this noise, and I kind of look around and keep going. It took me weeks to learn that you cannot turn right on a red light in Germany. I was just, everywhere I went, I'm just breaking traffic laws. But yeah, so it was a great question, and it was a very challenging time, but I think it was just kind of that continued perseverance of saying, I made a commitment, we're going to make this work, and I'm going to enjoy the learning along the way.
Did you speak German?
No, I learned a little bit of German, but what was funny is everybody wanted to practice their English with me. And so but my children were born in Germany, so I joined a mother's group. So I'm kind of, and I was in the mother's group for 5 years, and that was unbelievable. By the way, Women Supporting Women, that mother's group really helped me being a young mother, no grandparents in sight, different country, different culture. Those women were just so important to me. But so I sing all the nursery rhymes and things like that. But I did learn a little bit of German while I was there.
Hello. So the past 2 days we've been talking about empowering ourselves as women, empowering the women, you know, with us, against us even, and the different leadership qualities and styles between men and women. However, there are many different leadership qualities and styles between women and women, and that can cause conflict when trying to work together as a team, whether it's a counterpart or, you know, manager to direct report. So what advice can you offer about working with a fellow woman who has a very different leadership style than you, while, you know, working to a common goal, bettering the team, bettering the business? What advice can you offer for that?
So I'll go first. So my direct leadership team, we have some very different working styles. And so I think the first thing is try to understand what those are. And there's a lot of great activities you can do. I mean, there's so many things. There's strengths-based finders, there's colors, there's, you know, there's the list is really long. But if you spend some time on that and understand that so that you can appreciate those differences and you get to know, you know, what works and doesn't work, it kind of puts it out there on the table for you. And we joke about it, you know, that so-and-so's blue and you're gold. If you're familiar with colors, that's a good one. But it allows you to talk about it and recognize it so that that you understand that person better, and that if, you know, they're in your face and you're like, well, you know, if you're kind of blue like I am, we understand how to communicate with each other. So spend some time as a team, and we've done that as an executive team, as a leadership team, and it's not easy. It can be really painful, but when you get there and you really, I think they called it a breakthrough, when we actually got in the room and were really honest with each other, it makes for a really strong team, and you can work so much better together.
I'll add on to that from my perspective. I've had the benefit of having female bosses, female peers, and female employees throughout my career. The majority of my managers have been men during my career, but there were, you know, aspirational women that were in the organization that I was always looked up to. But I found similar style for me, my leadership style for women or for men is pretty much the same. I really don't think of it as different. It's setting, you know, making sure the expectations are clear, communication is ongoing, regular, positive in nature, and just kind of, you know, having that direct, ongoing dialogue. And I know I've heard from, I've got good relationships, I'd say, with, you know, current and past female colleagues, which, you know, when I left Avnet, one of the hardest things for me was leaving my team. You know, that was, you're just like, you know, making that decision for a new opportunity. It was about, yeah, leaving my team. And now my team are my friends. And we reach out regularly, and we're still in communication. And I find that's just a blessing. So, yeah, I don't know that it changes as much. But also at Flex, I was super inspired to join Flex having a female CEO. And you don't have a lot of, you know, female CEOs at this level, at her level. So I was also like super excited because I wanted to make her successful in her journey and be part of that. So I think it's just always going back to supporting each other any way we can.
Thank you guys so much for all of your great insight. We talked a lot about bias over the last couple days. And we all have biases, right? Unconscious and some, unfortunately, conscious biases. I'm just curious, what advice can you give the leaders in the room of how do we manage leaders to make sure that they are aware of those biases, and how do they overcome them, right? They're going to be there, but it's all about how do you manage those biases, whether they're conscious or unconscious biases.
Okay, I'll start again. One of the things I do when it comes to hiring practices, especially at the senior levels within my organization, I always make sure we're doing panel interviews. My boss, myself, my HR partner, but then, you know, a few people that will be a peer to the person that we're hiring. And first you want to bring in a broad candidate pool to make sure you're getting a lot of people that are being looked at, but also having that multiple people interview for these critical, you know, positions, and then coming together, having that discussion and making sure you're getting the, you know, hiring the right person for the job. Hopefully having a number of people being involved will eliminate some of that bias. And also it's very important to me is kind of the team dynamic of, you want to bring someone onto the team that's going to add and not detract. And so that's one of the things I'm doing to try and address unconscious bias and look for ways to make sure you're, you know, driving inclusive, you know, diversity and inclusion while focusing on making sure you're selecting the best candidate for a role.
Yeah, good. That's a great question, and you're right. Biases, we all have them. I mean, but don't be quick to judge, right? There's a difference, and I'll just close out what Lynn said. Inclusiveness is one of our core values. So you just got to remind people, right? And we all have them, you know. But the culture should win first, right? So similar to Lynn, the interviewing process, the recruiting process, the engagement process with the employees. It's all about inclusiveness in the culture, and that has to win out. Okay, and then when you see it, again, you got to lead from the top. You got to address it right away, right, and remind people very very directly. Okay, on that situation if it happens to be negative.
Yeah, I was going to just add to that on the communication piece of it. What Phil said there was it's important not to let that build up and you give it a review time. It's when it occurs, because obviously the unconscious piece of it, they're not aware. So we've got to figure out a way in order how to do it respectfully to help, I'll say, enlighten and sort of get to the point of where the bias is coming from.
If I can add, the ERGs, I think, is helping us as well, the employee resource groups. We've got up to 8 now. And one of my executive team members sits and leads or co-leads every one of those ERGs. And I believe that has really helped. And they're global. So the RISE, Regina, she leads that with one of our executives as well. And it's not just because we're in Arizona. It's not just Arizona. It's a global group. Okay, of course, it's harder to engage if they're not there. So, but it's a global group, and we have I don't want to go through them all, but we have one for 8 different types of organizations, and are really I think making a difference in that.
Yeah. So what we're talking about is decision making, right? Your bias, what you're aware of, what you're not aware of, really influences your decision making. And so I'll tell you, I think this is really important, and I keep an eye out for it. I probably don't keep as close an eye out for it in myself as I do with the people that I work with. But actually, in this room, it's kind of a unique situation for me. My past life HR business partner is in the room, Melissa. And my current life HR business person is in the room, Alyssa. I got a Melissa and Alyssa. And one of the things that I really look for in those relationships is that to kind of keep me honest, because it's tough. And I will say, when we talked about this, everybody's talked about this with respect to interviewing. It really becomes obvious. So what I tell you. We've been doing a lot of interviewing, and for lots of different levels, but some very key positions, some new positions that have recently been added to the org chart, actually a whole new level on the sales team. It's part of a sales transformation effort. And I spend, honestly, I feel like I have weeks where I think I spend, 300% of my time interviewing. But it's important, and it's, because one, I want my own opinion in these things, because at the end of the day, in distribution, it's a people and parts business. The better the people you have, the better inventory you have, the better everything you have, right? So this is something important, and I would advise everybody to make that investment. But part of it too, especially I'm now, 9 or 10 months with the company, it's a way for me to learn more about the people I'm working with. So I will end up asking them in the debriefs a lot of questions about, so why do you think that way? Why did you, where are you coming from on this? And pointing out that what we tend to do is be attracted to people that look and sound like us, right? And so no surprise one day you wake up and you got a company full of people that are clones of yourself, and which I have, as you guys heard me talk about this morning, I think that's extremely dangerous. So that's part of why I'm actively participating in a lot of interviewing process, because I want to, I want to see how people are thinking. So I ask a lot of questions, tell me more about that. Can you explain that? Where are you coming from? That kind of thing. So does that hopefully that's helpful. Does that, Melissa and Alyssa, does that resonate? Am I talking out of my butt again? Okay.
We're here to keep you honest.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. I think.
So on that note, I've got a question. So Don, one of the values that you mentioned was don't be afraid to make lofty goals and go after things. I love a great goal. But how do you persist? What actions do you take when those goals are overwhelming and you've got to like persist through?
Yeah, but setting a lofty goal does not, don't let that be the overwhelming factor. When I say a lofty goal, to go out and take a business from 180 million to 500 million, that's a big goal. Set it over the right period of time. But you've got to break it down and bring, your team, the people in and say, okay, what's it going to take in order for us to do this? If I look at it at Walden, it's not going to be done by doing the same things that we've been doing prior. So it's a combination of things. And you start breaking it down, and we've taken it to the level now to where you go look at, we've signed 16 lines. And if you look at, with the programs that we have in place, we can tie it to how much inventory, and we can take the history to where we can tie it back. So it's rationalizing it, at least to some level, in order to make it feel less overwhelming. So you still have to put some, I'll say, some thought into it. But don't be afraid in order to go out. I mean, what do you want to do in your career? I look at it that when I was in my 20s, what I thought was that aspiration, it changed pretty dramatically. And as I got a taste and I learned more. So I think you have to not only set lofty goals, you have to sometimes go back and revisit to make sure that what you did set was right on of really where you want to go.
We can take just one more question.
Okay, so I have a question. First, I think it's fascinating that all of your leaders in the same industry and you have such different leadership styles and personalities. I mean, I think that for everybody in this room is. So I'm wondering along that note, because I have actually worked under three of you guys, how did you develop your leadership style? Whether you're the teacher or the energizer or the directionally motivating person. How did you develop that, and how would you encourage upcoming leaders to develop their own style?
Well, I think I went through part of it with me. Some of mine, was developed, I'll say, through good, honest feedback and coaching. Mentors being, I was lucky enough to have some that were truly honest with me. I'm not sure we all have that luxury. I'm not sure I've always been given that feedback. So I think that piece shaped me quite a bit. Learning, going through those failures. Some of the things that I tried, some of the things that I did in my career that I thought was good management at the time, I know today, maybe it worked some, but it doesn't work, enough. And it may work to get the end result, but you end up damaging something else. So I think, to me, it's been trial and error. I mean, there's certain things that, I said I brought into my career that my parents instilled, that, discipline and hard work and showing up and doing what you say you're going to do. Those things, I didn't need to, I'll say, have a bad experience in order to learn that. Nobody had to teach me that. My dad taught me that growing up.
Yeah, it's. I think your observation's great because there's all types of different leaders, and there's different leaders can be successful differently, and so it's a great observation. I think some of it is foundational. I mean, I think some of it is upbringing that's just from a family or values standpoint. Not all of it, by any stretch of imagination. We talked at Heart Table, for example. I grew up I always liked the underdog. I never liked bullies. Can't stand them actually, because that's always been. It's just a bias that I've had when people pick on somebody or bully, and you see it in business or in teams, and it really, really bothers me. But that said, I think you get it through formal training, but even more so through informal, which is what was so good about today, and I'm sure yesterday, is the formal/informal training and mentoring opportunity that you have. I just remember, I was blessed to have a lot of good leaders. Dan Buckley, Harley Feldberg, Roy Valley, I go on and on, they were talking about all different, totally different leaders, but you pick up a little bit, from all of them. And so just been blessed, but just kind of back to the goals, just watch a lot of people, see who do you want. You see somebody in a meeting, you say, well, that's really classy, or that's really well done, that's nice. And equally, when you see something you don't like, don't be that person then, okay? And remember that. So I have a whole bunch in my head I could reel off. I won't for the sake of time. There's that things I wanted to look like and things I definitely did not want to look like. But just it's every day. It's a journey, and I just been, when I said blessed to have a lot of good coaches and family right on through senior executives at Avnet.
Yeah, I agree with everything both of you said, from the foundational family values, being authentic, observing leaders that you admire and want to emulate, and observing leaders that you do not like the approach they're taking, and make sure you never repeat that. And I see it as a constant journey of continuous learning and improvement, because that's something I'm still very much focused on today. Learning from great leaders to hopefully continuously improve myself.
Okay.
Well, first of all, thank you for putting me in that category, Karen, because I am definitely, I know it, a work in process on this whole leadership thing. I will just confess, I'll come clean. I'm a fake it till you make it kind of guy. But I think it's actually, it comes down to being self-aware. And it starts there. If you're self-aware, you're surrounded by good people, and you listen. Mentorship's been everything. I'm 100% the product of being around good people in my past, in my present, and then being open and acknowledging that Jesus, these I got something to learn here, and you can't, as Lynn said, you can't ever stop learning, being curious. But you guys feel like I think you said it, Lynn, like work in progress, right? It never stops, right? Yeah. So, but anyway, thank you for the, you might not have intended it, but I took it as a compliment, and that's.
So I would just like to say, I think we've been talking about it for 2 days, and you acknowledged it, that we are all very different. And that's really what makes it work, is that everyone brings something to the table that's different, and we all learn from each other, and it is truly an evolution. And I said yesterday, and I believe it, we are never done. So thank you for acknowledging that and noticing it. It's important.
Okay, I think we have one final question. One final question, then we're done. We're almost at time.
Thank you for your time today. My question is simple. So have you ever felt any form of imposter syndrome? The feeling that you're not good enough?
Yeah.
Simple but difficult.
Go ahead.
I'm going to start because you didn't have the privilege of listening to Carla Howard speak yesterday, and she talked about our inner critics, and every day writing a day of the week and put a tick on the piece of paper whenever you feel like you're not good enough, or you're doubting something about yourself. And I'd be willing to bet everyone in this room probably has a tick or two on the paper. And, that was so helpful to me. And I put a tick on the paper before I came up and talked yesterday. And so, yes. And then somebody asked me yesterday, how often do you speak, or do you like to get up and speak? And I said, no, I don't. But I did, and it was really good for me. So, anyway.
So I think we all nodded our heads yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, well, it happens all the time. You end up in situations to where you think back, how did I get here? And sometimes you learn to, I'll say, get through it, because you have to. You've got the responsibility now, so you figured it out, I guess, where you jumped in. But, it still happens. It's happened, throughout my career.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, multiple times. Constantly. I mean, if you're overconfident, I mean, even some of us kidding me today, we get, hey, well, you getting anxious, get nervous. I said, you don't not get nervous. I said, hell yeah, just like Linda. It's like some of the best comedians you talk about, they're introverts. I mean, they before they get on the stage. So, yeah, all the time. And we talked about it during one of the breakouts. Confidence is fine. Arrogance is not. Okay, and if you think you got the answer to everything, you're going to be in trouble. So, being confident is fine. Have a good presence is great. But when that line crosses to like arrogance or your note on, forget it. So, yeah, but I constantly, the answer is yes.
Yeah, I'd say like everybody, you always have it. That's where you lean on your team again, because you're not expected to have all the answers or to be the smartest person in the room. Your job is to bring the smartest minds together and hopefully make the best decision. But I think so it has to be humbleness when you have that kind of feeling. But then you have to kind of have the confidence to help get through it too. So it's kind of a challenge all the time. But I think, yeah, everybody kind of experiences it. Michael, you said it right now, right?
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate our panelists for all your participation in the program, not just this session, but throughout, and even our strategy sessions behind the scenes. There's a lot more involved in strategy with our council members. So round of applause, and thank you so much.
Good job.